You're listening to the Golden Nugget podcast, a podcast designed to feel like you're sitting down for an hour a week chatting with a few of your best friends and learning how to grow and lean into all that God has called you to be. We love you so much. Don't forget to subscribe and follow us on our Instagram at the Golden Nugget Pod. Let's jump in. Hello and welcome back to your favorite podcast, the Golden Nugget Podcast. I'm your host and your best friend, Anna Golden, and it's just us today. Another one of these little solo podcasts, guys. You guys gotta let me know if it feels like you're just sitting down talking on a FaceTime call, because that's what it feels like for me, but there's no response on the other side. I was vlogging this morning because, I'm such a vlogger now, and I was just like, there was a moment where I waited for a response, like you guys were going to talk back to me. And then I was like, am I clinically insane? But anyway, all that to say, welcome back. And we didn't have a podcast last week. Actually, we didn't have a vlog or a podcast last week. It was our Sabbath week. But I'm so excited to just sit down and talk. I did like a Q&A on my Instagram. So we're going to get into some of those questions and just talk about all the things of life right now. But we also didn't have a vlog last week as well. And the vlog this week is so special. There's a lot that has gone into it, and it just was such a special week, and I'm so excited to share about it and y'all to hear about it and to see like what we got to experience and be a part of. So don't forget to check that out. It'll be on my YouTube channel. So if you listen to the podcast somewhere else, go to YouTube for that. Or if you're already on YouTube, I don't know, set on notification. Do people do that? I always see like artists and people like, hey, don't forget to turn on your post notifications. And I guess that's real, because sometimes you miss posts from people. I don't know about you guys, but I have pretty much everyone that I follow muted. Is that horrible to say out loud? I just don't want to spend too much time on Instagram. So I'm like, I'll like get caught up. I literally maybe like my closest friends that I spend every day with, which is like, those are the people that I don't need to be seeing their posts. I guess I need to see the people that like I don't get to spend every day with, so I get caught up on their lives. Anyway, I don't know, maybe I should cut this part out. I'm like, hey, if I follow you, you're blocked. No, not blocked, muted. And it's honestly so great. You know what's even better than that? Restricting things. Because before, like, if people left like crazy comments, because like that's how life is. My friend Mariana told me the other day that when we posted, I posted her on my Instagram, that she got all this like hate from someone that followed me, and they just like kept posting like mean comments on all of her stuff, and she had to go private. And I was like, oh my gosh, there's people out there like that. So there's this new thing that you can do, and it's restrict people, because sometimes when you block someone, it creates like a new fire in them, and they'll make another account and they'll keep going for it. And I mean, I experienced this on like the smallest scale, but for other people, I'm like, man, you guys probably have to really be policing those comments. Anyway, today's brought to you by Alani. I wish, you guys, I just have to say, Celsius is out. Celsius is out. The logo, the branding of Celsius looks like Microsoft. It's out. It's marketed towards men, I would say. And their flavors aren't even that great. And it's just kind of icky, and the cans are gross, and it's like marketing's bad. Alani is in, okay? Like, I love this. I would use this can as a phone case. I love it. I love their flavors. It tastes like a melted snow cone, and there's like 5 calories in it. What's in it? I don't know. It's supposed to be good stuff. It's supposed to be vegan, B6, B12, lots of energy, 100 milligrams in these little, and I love the little teeny cans, because it's like you don't waste it. You get half now, and then you can do another can later, and that's the equivalent of 1 large can. Anyway, that's math if you guys didn't know. I wish that felt like such an ad. I'm going to send that to them and be like, please, I literally just send me some cans. Fun fact, my sister was like endorsed by Alani for a second, and they just like reached out to her years ago. Like, hey, we want to send you some. And I'm like, in my wildest dreams. But anyway, this is going to be keeping me alive. Guys, in Dallas right now, I'm filming this mid morning, and it looks like the sun is about to set. The weather in Dallas has been so weird, and everything's been like, oh, there's going to be huge hailstorms, or oh my gosh, the other night it was like massive thunder and nothing else. And I was like, I don't like the feeling of this. Also, there was some really big like dust thing that came in, and it made everything look red. Anyway, that's not what we're here to talk about. The weather, like, what is this, a bad first date? We're here to get into some Q&A. And you guys, I read through these questions prior to filming this, of course, and some funny common themes. But let's get into it. Also, I love doing a Q&A on my Instagram and seeing my friends just ask me the craziest things. I'm like, you guys don't get to be a part of this. Do you ever wish, like on Facebook Marketplace, when you post something, there's a button that says like, don't show this to any of my friends? And it's like, please, I wish I could do that with so many things. Like when I have to post stuff about like marketing stuff or like an ad, or I don't know, sometimes I'm like, don't show this to my friends. But okay, let's get into it. First question was by my mother. When are you planning on having kids? Asking for a friend. I think she thought that this question submission was anonymous. So that's great. Thank you for that, Mom. You shouldn't be on Instagram. I genuinely think my mom has an Instagram like she doesn't post for anything. All she does is like comment and like on my stuff and my sibling stuff, and just to watch our stuff. She has her post notifications on, you know it. Okay. What was a pivotal moment in your life that shifted your relationship with God? It's a great question. When I was 14, 15, my oldest brother had started just finding out more about his health journey. He's open about all those things, like his mental health. I would love to have him on the podcast one day and just kind of talk through all those things. But it was a really hard time for our family, and we just didn't understand. There's actually a song that's on Corey Asbury's last album called Misunderstood, which is about my brother. And really the heart of that song was like, man, I'm sorry you were so misunderstood. Like we had no information on the way that your brain worked, on what mental health looked like, all those things. And it was just kind of a really shaking time for our family. At that time, I want to say most of my siblings had moved out of the house, which was also a really different dynamic. I was the youngest of four, used to like a super rambunctious home, and then everybody moved out, and then it was just kind of me at 15, 16. And I just remember in that season feeling like life as, you know, a 14, 15-year-old was really different. And I didn't know at that time that I was OCD. And for me, like, change is something that's really difficult, and just like breaking a pattern. And so it was just like a mind-bending time, and I felt like my thoughts were attacking me. I remember like telling my mom that when I was young, and her being like sharing Romans 12:2 with me, be transformed by the renewing of your mind. And I just would write that on every one of my mirrors, like every day. But I like vividly remember a moment in my childhood home, sitting in my bed, like I just got this hunger for scripture from my church. I was like homeschooled and doing an internship at my church that like they literally made for the homeschoolers for our prayer room that we were in. And I just fell in love with the word of God and just scripture. And all I wanted to do was just read scripture. And it was like, I didn't want to do my schoolwork. It's like classic. But I just remember reading my Bible in my room, and Holy Spirit just like broke into my life in a way that I can't really put into words. I reference this all the time of feeling like I'm so blessed or lucky. Christians don't love that word, but I feel fortunate that God became so real to me so young. And that was something that was probably genuinely most pivotal moment of my life. Like I can go through like harder times, like when I broke off my engagement, or when I moved from LA to South Carolina, or when I moved from South Carolina. Like there were definitely some big life moments, but I would say the most pivotal one is when the Lord, like, he really introduced himself to me. Like I knew him since I was a kid, but it was like this like formal introduction of who he was. And I was so grateful to have that anchor, because there were things that I was going to experience in my life that I never thought I would have to, or in my family, or, you know, just in general. And I was like, man, I'm so glad that even when people's faith around me changed, mine didn't, because I just knew him. Like I have this song called Doubt, and it was on my first record that I released. It's actually a super fun song. And it's like, you can't make me doubt him. I would have never made it this far without him. Like he has never let me down. I know him way too well. And like, I genuinely feel those words in my bones. Like even through, y'all are super familiar with like me talking about like church hurt and my last album with Manasseh and all that stuff. There's never been a moment that I questioned the Lord, like if he was real or if he had a plan for my life. I'm like, no, I know you love me. Like that's something that you broke in super young, and we're like, if you're going to know anything, you're going to know this. So I would say, in the longest way I could possibly have said that moment. What season of my life has challenged my faith the most? I wouldn't say season. Don't we love putting things into seasons? You know, I feel like it wouldn't be a season, but it would be the thing in life that challenges my faith the most. Would be God's timing. Like I said, like I've never been like, oh, I'm not questioning who you are if you're real. I'm not. That's something that I feel fortunate enough that became so undeniably unshakable in my life. Or if you love me, if you care for me. But there have definitely been moments I'm like, what? This doesn't make sense. I'm big on efficiency. And I am always like, this doesn't feel like it's efficient. Like, I don't know why you're making me, like with the Israelites, why are you guys taking so long to get to the promised land? And it's like, the Lord has an aerial view. The Lord knew Moses can't enter the promised land. The Lord knew that Moses couldn't take the people in the promised land. The Lord knew that the minute they got out and had a moment of wandering, then they're going to build an idol, and they're all going to literally, like after the sea split, they're celebrating another God. And it's like, there's things that we're just so unaware of. But when I get my most human self and I'm so detached from that ideal, I'm just like, Lord, what are you doing? Like, what is this? How does this make sense? How does it make sense that you want me to move here? How does it make sense that you want me to do this? What makes sense about this? That I would say that his timing has been the thing that challenges my faith the most. And I think just on a real human level, like healing, when you're believing for healing for somebody and you don't see it, I'd be like, that's the time where you like hunker down the most in who God is. And like, we live in a broken world, so broken things are going to happen. And that would be like something that's like, oh man, I just have to remind myself who he is. But God's timing has definitely been one that I'm like, Lord. Okay, guys, we're back. You're like, what? You left? We had to adjust some of the lighting really quick because it looks like the apocalypse outside. So sorry. It's like, I know it wasn't any time for you guys, but it was for us. So let's keep going. Okay, next question. How does your songwriting process look like? How does your songwriting process look like? Okay, cool way to say that. I'm having a bad writer's block. I would say that it always looks different. I say this all the time as regards to songwriting. I know there's a couple questions about songwriting, and hopefully this kind of sums some of them up. Songwriting is like 10% inspiration and 90% self-discipline, because anybody can get inspired, but it takes the wherewithal to actually write the song. So do as much as you can to practice strengthening that muscle. Like if you have an entire Rolodex of unfinished songs, start making it to where like, okay, my resolution for this year, my goal is that every week I'm going to take one of these unfinished songs and I'm going to finish it. When you feel like you have a lack of inspiration and you're primarily writing worship music, worship, get in the word, spend time in the presence of God. That is like, I always say, because I started in pop music, I'm like, we have such a cheat code and a cheat sheet on this side of music, being in worship in church, because we have an entire book of songs already that we get to pull from. And it just takes sitting in the presence of God for just a moment and just start worshiping, like pouring your heart out. Worship with one of your favorite songs and then just keep playing and let a spontaneous moment happen. Like there is truly an endless well of ideas, of creativity. We serve a God that is beyond creative, like more than we could ever imagine. Like he literally formed the bees that have a little stinger and little fuzzy butts and the little wings. I just saw this picture of a little bee sleeping in a flower and I was like, that's so funny. And it was like, sometimes bees take naps in flowers when they're getting pollen. And I'm like, he thought of all of those things. I'm like, so there's an unlimited well that you can constantly pull from. And that would be something that would be my biggest advice of like, if every time you sit down at the piano, you're going to write a song and it's for church or it's for a Christian song, and you don't just sit and worship the Lord, then that's where that writer's block, I feel like, happens so much for me personally. If it's just constantly like, I need to pull song, and I don't just have a moment to be like that Mary and Martha, like, let me sit at your feet and just gain knowledge from you. Let me just spend time with you. Let me just like sit under what you have to say over me. And you'll just see like songs just start to just pop out and moments of prayer and things like that. My favorite lip gloss at the moment? What a question. Honestly, there's this Ariana Grande's Rim Beauty. I've been loving those glosses. They look like a little capsule. They're so good. They last forever. I did that master class for our church the other day. I feel like I talked about it on here, maybe not, for all the interns. And afterwards they're like, what lip gloss were you wearing? It stayed on the whole time. And I was like, wow, what a compliment. Let's see. If you wanted people to know one thing about worship, what would it be? Man, there's so many things, but I would say that it's super necessary. Like, worship saved my life. Like learning how to lead myself into worship and not wait for someone else to do it. So like in my home, in my childhood bedroom, like I talked about before, being able to know that I have direct access to the presence of God. And like I said, like change was so hard for me. And I realized when I would worship the Lord and when I would sit in his presence, that was something that would never change. Like he would never change his mind if he was going to show up. It was never going, the atmosphere of that wouldn't change. Like that was my safe, constant place forever. And, yeah, I would say, man, it's so necessary. I could say a million things about worship, but this is a funny question. Talking to a guy who's 3.5 years younger than me, I'm 28. Does an age gap matter in marriage? This is a funny question to me because I thought the same thing. When I started dating my husband, Enoch, I went honestly to my pastors and was like, hey, he's 3.5 years younger than me. Just like tell me to like cut it off. Like it's weird, right? Like it's like a guy being younger, and he was 23 and I was 26. I had just turned 27, so 3.5. So sometimes it looks like 4 years. And I was like, yeah, it's never going to work. And then my pastor was like, she was like, I'm 3.5 years older than Earl, like her husband. I was like, what? I think, here's how I feel about age gaps. Obviously, this could open a broader conversation. Here's how I feel about this age gap. Okay. Because there are some age gaps that are highly inappropriate and illegal. So we won't get into all that. But she said she's 28. I feel like life experience speaks so much into maturity that I've met a 28-year-old man that I'm like, man, you could be a father of 5 and you're like killing it. And then I've met a 28-year-old man who was like, man, do you even remember to pay your phone bill? Oh, you don't, because you're still on your parents' phone bill. You know what I mean? So it's like, there's so many different levels when it comes to, I feel like once you get past a certain age of like 22, 23, it really just goes into like, how are they raised? What does their life experience looks like? How long have they been a man? And that's, to me, like, as a woman, it's like, how long have you like paid your own bills? How long have you had a full-time job? What did it look like? Your family dynamic? Are you the youngest or are you the oldest? Like, what did you have to grow up in? I think all of that plays so much into it. So it's really like subjective to the situation. But to me, I'm like, no, I don't see anything wrong with it. My husband is 3.5 years younger than me. I definitely, like, we make jokes all the time, like when we can tell like our age gap, but it really was, for me, I felt like Enoch loved the Lord so much and he was so mature in all of the things that I valued. And I was like, okay, that I didn't feel like when we would spend time with the Lord together or when we would have deep conversations, I'm like, oh, you're so young. Like I never felt like there was a gap there at all. So I think that that's something that speaks to that. And like if you're like, oh, I feel like I'm teaching you how to be a man, that's a whole nother thing. That we're not called to be someone's mom. We're called to be their partner. So I feel like I feel like anyway, I don't think it matters I don't think it matters like you think it will, but there will be things that you do notice and you just have to have grace for those things. Do you know what I mean? So the reality is like women mature faster and you're 3.5 years older. So there'll be some things maybe emotionally or I don't know, your situation personally, but you'll be like, oh, I feel like he's not where I'm at in this. And that's where it's like, you've made the conscious decision to be with someone who's a little bit younger. So you just have to have grace for that, if that makes sense. Anyway, I feel like there's more questions about dating younger. And I'm like, did you guys watch our podcast about us having the age difference? I love it. So funny. What are some of your most recent favorite purchases? Honestly, these little hydrangeas right here that are sitting next to me, I love them so much. I recently did the house full of fake flowers because I was sick of like getting new flowers and then coming back out being out of town and then they're all dead and they have like a weird smell. And this just like makes me happy that it always looks like there's life in here. That's one of them. Also, I've been recently loving the Gap. Love everything from Gap. Like everything. So good. I could do a 45-minute monologue on my recent favorite purchases. So I'm going to just stop it at that. Okay, let's keep going. Did you have any hesitance dating younger? This is from a different person. I love this. I did, for sure. Like, I totally did. I thought that, especially because I was the older one, like, I've always dated guys who are way older than me, and I always thought that was so okay. I look back when I was like 20, and I was like, oh, there was a really weird power dynamic there that I just was like, oh, I'm so mature for my age. And I didn't realize, like, oh, why would a guy who's so much older than me want to be with someone who's so young? And I was like, that was weird. But all that to say, I definitely was like so in my head about it because I think there's also like social norms and all the things, because the reality is, as if like girls wouldn't be sending this question in if their partner was like 5, 6, 7 years older than them and was a guy. You know what I mean? Like when for some reason the girl's a little bit older, it's like, oh, this is weird. It's like a girl being taller. And it's like, I don't think I used to think it was such a stigma or so like abnormal, but now I'm like, I love it. I love Enoch so much. I wouldn't change a thing. So yes, I did have hesitance, but I did get over it, as you can see. When you experienced church hurt, how did you relinquish justice to God and move on from it? Man, I've said this before, but I used to think that forgiveness was the absence of justice and that I couldn't let something go until the Lord took care of it. But the reality is the Lord couldn't take care of it until I let it go. And I use this analogy of like, I picture my life like a stove, and I have all of these like pots bubbling over on these burners, and the Lord's like, take it off the stove and give it to me. And I'm like, no, I need you to see this. I need you to see this bubbling over, so you know that it's still so important and how much it hurts me. But I'm like constantly letting it bubble over. Does that make sense? And I'm like, no, I need you to look at this. I need you to look at this right now. It's still happening. It's still happening. And the Lord's like, when you let that go, I'll be able to take care of it. And then on another side of it, it was like, there's so many people in life that my situation or something I did to them is on their burner. And I'm so grateful that the Lord didn't give me, quote unquote, what I deserved for everything that I've done. And so it's almost like you have to take this whole like world view of perspective of like, man, God loves everybody so much, and we're all God's favorite. Do you ever like, if you're ever in a situation where you're like, man, Lord, like you really love me, like you're really working this out for me. And it's like, he's really doing that for all parties that are involved. And I think that it takes a level of like, man, in my song Manasseh, there's a moment of the song that's like, I let it all go. I let it all go. You can take it from here. And that part of that song came from me just worshiping with it, because I think when I wrote it, I didn't know, it took a long time for me to write. And when I first started singing it, I don't know if it was fully the truth for me yet. And there are times even now, because like church hurt is like people hurt, relationship hurt, family hurt. It's forever going to happen because you're forever involved in it, and there's people involved. And there's always going to be things you have to let go. There's always going to be things that you have to just lay at the feet of Jesus. And for me, I constantly have to keep walking through that. And I would say a weird way to answer this is like, it just is endless surrender of just realizing that, Lord, like you do go before me and you fight my battles. And this is something that I'm just going to have to trust you in. I'm going to trust you to take care of it in a way that I'm so glad I'm not God, because I would have taken care of his situations so much differently. And just being able to release that. But I'm sorry for what you've experienced, what you're going through. It's not easy, but it's so worth doing the work to let it go. Because there are just moments in life where you will find yourself just being like, God, would you just remove this from me? Like, I don't want this emotion anymore. I don't want to feel this way about your people. I don't want to feel this way about your church. I don't want to feel this way. And it's like, we do have the opportunity to release it. And it looks like that Romans 12:2, a daily renewal of your mind and constantly being put in perspective of like, okay, Lord, you go before me, you fight my battles, your goodness and mercy not only follow me, but they precede me wherever I go. So I hope I answered that question. How you needed to hear it. Next question. Are you going to do more vlogs? Duh. We took 1 week off and I feel like everybody thinks I stopped. I feel so bad. I should have made an announcement, but, we'll see. You'll see why. Okay. What does my songwriting process look like? I think I kind of said that. Sometimes, the reality is sometimes I'll be in a moment of worship or prayer and I'll pull out my phone and I'll show you guys. I'll pull out my phone and I'll do like a voice memo of like an idea or a concept. Wow. I'm just going to, I'm trying to see if I can find this thing, because the other day I had this idea. Like I'll just sing something into my phone, and then I'll either bring it into a songwriting session or I'll sit at the piano with it and kind of work out what I felt like I was hurting or worship with it. And then I'll try to form it into the structure of a song. But that's literally my entire voice memos. And so that's kind of what my process will look like. Or I'll be sitting on a plane and I'll see something or a scripture and I'll just write it down in my notes. And then I'll come back to that. So it's like those little moment strikes of inspiration, jot them down if you're not in the place to just like fully flesh it out. And then have an appointment every week where you're like, let me flesh out these ideas. And that is how you just keep the strength of songwriting, keep your muscle going. I totally lost my place in all these questions. What's my workout routine? Thank you for asking. I'm such an athlete. I have a gym here in Dallas that I absolutely love called Class Studios. If you're in Dallas, I can't recommend it enough. It's like if Orange Theory and Soul Cycle and Barry's Boot Camp and all of those different workout classes had a baby, and it's all combined. So like there's strength classes and sculpt classes like that are like hot yoga type classes. And then there's train classes that are like with the rower. And then there's tread classes with a treadmill and you're doing weights as well. And then there's cycle and like spin classes, all the things. And so my routine when I'm home is I try to work out every day. I'll do like 1 day of recovery. It used to be Sunday, but now it's like changed my life working out after church on a Sunday. It just like resets me. I think we just realize that our body can do so much more than we think. Like I used to think, oh man, after I lead worship for 3 services, I've been up since 4:45 a.m. Like there's no way I can do a 4:30 class. And I'm like, no, I can do it. And it like gives me a whole jolt of energy to where I don't take Sunday naps now. And it's like a blast. So, I just try to do it every day. So I have a class right after this. And then tomorrow we have a flight at like 2 p.m. So then I'll do a class early in the morning. And then Friday we'll be in Florida. So I will say like my thing that I have not conquered is like working out on the road. Which is so hard for me. And so that's something I'm working on. But then I'll have a class booked for Saturday. And honestly, like my accountability is like when you book classes for any class studio, like any class kind of gym, there's a penalty if you don't show up. So that's great because you're like, oh, I can't lose $25 every day. So just book the class before the time cut off and then you'll just be accountable to it. Okay, we'll keep going. Please give tips for taking care of your voice as a worship leader. This is great. I would say my biggest tip, like in general, is the fact of you need to sing correctly. So if you're constantly losing your voice, if you're constantly getting hoarse, you have pain when you're singing on a Sunday, or if you're leading a worship night, whatever it might be, go see a vocal coach. Invest in your instrument. Invest in the gifts and the talents that the Lord has given you. That is like the parable of the talents. What are you going to do with what's in your hands? And that's something that the Lord's given to you. So make sure that you're singing correctly. That's like ground zero. Like most people are like, what do you do for like recovery? What do you do for warm-ups? I'm like, it happens while you're singing. It's like lifting weights. Like you can do as much stretching, as much cool down as possible, but if your form is bad, you're gonna damage something. So you need to make sure that for sure is good. And if that you're like still feeling fatigue, you work on your breathing. You definitely do warm-ups. You can do cool downs too. Sleep for me, like when I'm traveling, the biggest difference for me is always going to be sleep. Like I can do warm-ups till I'm blue in the face. I can do tea and honey and vocal zones and all the things, like all the little quick fixes that you try to do. But honestly, like there's nothing that rejuvenates your voice like sleeping. Yeah, so that would be my biggest thing. I'll do one more question. How do you get over the fear of what people think about you when you're trying to step out and do what you feel like the Lord's called you to do? It's a great question to end on. man, that to me is something I got this question asked the other day of like, how do you not care what people think about you? And I'm like, I totally care what people think about me. What do you mean? I've just learned to do it anyway. I 100% still care. I just do it anyway. Like, of course, like when you step out and you do a podcast or you release an album or you make a vlog or you make a TikTok or you start a business, like whatever it might be, there's always that like pressure of like, okay, what is everybody thinking? You do it anyway, and you get great at doing it anyway. You just keep doing it. Put yourself in situations where you feel that like fear being so crippling of like, what is everybody going to think? I'd rather just not do it. It's better to not do it than fail. That's the biggest lie. When I had my dad on the podcast last week or 2 weeks ago, and we talked about when he worked in a nursing home, and the biggest thing he heard from everybody is their biggest regret was that they didn't take enough risk. What would it look like if you took a deep breath, close your eyes, let all of the things go, all of the stuff that's holding you back of what other people think about what you want to do, what the Lord has placed on your heart to do, and you just did it anyway? What would your life look like? Just find a way to silence all of that noise. I'm like, you just keep getting better at it. The more you don't care about what people think, you just keep getting better at it. And what I have to realize too is everybody cares about themselves a little too much. And the people who have enough time to care so much about what you're doing to hate on it, I never want their life. That's never a life that I've desired. I'm like, they're never doing amazing things. They're never killing it for the Lord. They're just sideline hating. And I'm like, the guys who have enough time to hate are always on the sidelines. You'll never see someone on the field who's killing it, hating on you. And I'm like, okay, let him hate. Let him hate. And honestly, I was with Amanda Cook not long ago, and she said something that I just love so much. And it was like, in pertaining to what we do and like creating music and art, it's like art is supposed to like invoke an emotion that comes out of you. And for that, I'm like, if it's not a good emotion, then it still did its job. If it's like, oh, I don't love that, there was enough individuality and enough of yourself in it to where it's like, oh, someone didn't love it, and that's okay. What you're supposed to do is not for every single person. But if the Lord's calling you to do something that you're so crippled in what other people are thinking about, like I think about like if you want to lose weight and it's like, oh man, like I've tried so many times, like I'm embarrassed. I don't want it. I just rather not do it than the embarrassment of failing. And I'm like, man, we've just boxed ourselves so much into life. Or, oh, that's going to be so cringy if I try to start selling the thing that I created on TikTok and it gets like no views. It's like, who cares? Who cares? Do it. Do it anyway. Step out of the boat. This is a golden nugget for today. Okay. Step out of the boat. Do it anyway. Just that one thing that you've been so scared of, what are people going to think? Do it for yourself. Do it because you feel like the Lord has placed a passion on your heart to do it. And if nothing comes from it, but you conquered a fear of what people think, that's a win. Because the more you can silence that noise, the more that it can bubble up out of you at any moment. And then now you're like, okay, the fear of what other people think about me isn't holding me back anymore. And then you just have this open field of what you can do. And that's what I would say. I got a little passionate there, but I see so many talented, incredible people. I've done this in my own life, y'all. Like there's so many things that I'm like, man, I see so many people who have so much on the inside of them. And it's being held right here because they're like, what is everybody going to think? And it's like, man, God loves you. You're never going to lose that. And then you go forth. I'm like, there's nothing like when someone wholly, fully believes you and supports you. And I'm like, that's like the God of all creation is like standing behind you and being like in love with everything that you create, everything that you make. And I'm like, oh man, if you love it, that's how I have to get to a place when I'm like releasing new music. Oh my gosh, I think about that all the time. I'm like, oh, this is going to be, what if people don't like this? What if they don't like it as much as I used to? Like, I release a song like this. What if it doesn't do as well? Or what if people like this more? Or what if it doesn't? It's like, now I'm like, Lord, do you love this? Because ultimately this is for you. Everything I do is created for you. And if you love this, all right, I'm going to put it out. And then if you got people in your comments being like, oh, I don't love this as much. It's like, the Lord loves it, so I don't care. And there you have it. It's like, there you go. So I hope that encouraged you today. I love just like sitting down, talking, like feeling like we're on a FaceTime call. If you have any more questions, drop them in the chat of like the video. It's like, what am I on a live? If you have any more questions, let us know. Or if there's anything that's been like burning on your heart, it's like, please, I'd love for you to do a podcast on this. Let us know. We have some really fun ones coming up, and we'll have some more guests very soon. But I honestly, so much of wanting to do like a big sister type talk podcast of Q&A. I was on a plane the other day, and that specific question was like burning in me. So I'm so grateful that was just connected, and I got to answer that. But literally, if there's one thing you do this week, just release the fear. What is it? You guys, I'm going to end this on a quote. And you know what's so funny about this quote is I thought this quote was from the Cinderella story, the Hilary Duff movie. It's not. Apparently it's a Babe Ruth quote. And it's like, never let the fear of striking out keep you from playing the game. And I 100% thought that was like a Hilary Duff quote from Cinderella story. It was, apparently it is Babe Ruth. So, but I'm like, that is just the most real thing. Like, you will find yourself sitting on the bench your whole life just because you're too scared of not being able to hit the ball. But what if the joy is found in swinging the bat? Swing the bat. Have a good time. Get on the field, buddy. Like, just try it out. Anyway, we love you so much here at the Golden Nugget Podcast. We will see you next week. Bye.